Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. And our 1 o'clock is development permits, direct control district. Item 3.1. A, request for decision, redevelopment permit 2017-133. Colton, I think that's why you're standing there.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it is.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Council. This is development permit application DP 2017-133. The owner is a numbered company and the applicant is Vanity Homes. Plan 0710284 on 556 Murfield Crescent. Staff's recommendation is that Council approve option 1, which is approval of development permit application 2017-133 with the following conditions. Number 1, the development permit is issued for a new residence defined as a dwelling single detached. No variances have been granted, and development shall proceed according to Direct Control District 7 requirements and must conform to all provisions of the land use bylaw. And number 4, no permanent development shall occur on or over any utility right-of-way or easement. And then we have our standard notes that the development must meet all provincial and federal legislation. All construction shall conform to Alberta Safety Code regulations, and the builder shall install an indoor sprinkler system to Alberta Safety Code regulation. And finally, the builder shall adhere to the Lakes and Murfield architectural controls. Bit of background, the applicant's proposing to build a single-family dwelling. It's bungalow style, roughly 1,604 square feet and 23 feet in height. The 3 options for Council's consideration are to approve the application with conditions. Option 2, refuse the application with reasons given. Or option 3, provide an alternative recommendation of Council's choosing. So I'll now just go through the staff report that's attached. So as noted, it's located in the hamlet of La Alta. The zoning is DC7. The property is located within the Cell 2, residential type 2 of the direct control district. Given that it's a DC district, Council is responsible for the issuance of development permits for all discretionary uses listed within each development cell. There was no agency circulation performed. It was circulated internally. The comment was back, no issues other than the lack of a stable standalone sewage disposal system from our Transportation and Infrastructure Department. It was also circulated to all neighbors with no responses received. As noted, our recommendation is to approve it with the aforementioned conditions. I'll just go to the map here. So this is a location of where this house is proposed. This is the site plan. It meets the requirements of the bylaw. And that's the site. That's a photo of it. I'll just go back up to the condition or the recommendation, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ben, I think's turn.
Through the chair, I'm not going to move it yet until I get some answers on. I was just reading this, and I don't know if it's got no connection. Then let me know.
Okay.
When I read this letter from this committee report, and it says that Mr. Sousa stated they would review the wastewater problem if Homestead doesn't have a solution by the end of November. And I thought they were supposed to have that solution written in stone, done and settled, and it sounds to me like it's still not. And if it isn't, then I'm going to vote against this permit again, as I was before, because I thought they had that straightened out, and it doesn't sound like it's straightened out yet. So
I don't know, Angie, do you know anything?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we haven't had an update as yet, but we will have the developer coming in on November the 21st. He will be here in council, correct? So perhaps we can get a bit more information directly from Mr. Sousa at that point in time.
Through the chair, I'd also add on November 21st, I'm going to be bringing an update on where the Homesteads of La Alta conditional subdivision approval is at and where they're at with those conditions, so you can gauge and make your own thoughts into where that's at in terms of wastewater.
Talking about Scott's tongue-tied councillor report. Yeah, do you want to talk about it, Scott, or do you? I'll let you talk first.
That was stated by Mr. Souza at the meeting in direct relation to the homesteads, because it was asked by the public at the HOA Phase 1, saying they were very concerned about getting that built as well, and that was the statement that Mr. Souza made, was to review the viability of homesteads by the end of November, and they will make their own. If it doesn't proceed there, then they're going to proceed on their own, is the
Okay, and that's about all that was said.
No, I don't doubt that for a minute. My concern is, that's what they told us just about a year ago, that would be dealt with, and that's why we said, okay, if you're guaranteeing that that's gonna happen, then we'll allow development in stage 1 to continue, because you're gonna have that. Now they're telling us that they're still not sure what they have, and we've let, I don't know, 15 or 20 more developments go through in that have not got a final wastewater solution yet.
But I would, I guess that was a statement made at a open house, I would call it, maybe. Yeah, they'll be coming in, I'm hearing, later in the month.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, they'll be coming into the council meeting on November the 21st.
Okay.
So there's an opportunity to ask Jimmy directly then where he's at with that. So it's about the best we can do right now.
I'm thinking by the 21st, you should have a pretty good idea. Okay, Tom? Oh, I need a motion. I don't think, Ben, you want to move it? No, Ben don't want to move it. Tom, do you want to move it? And we usually say with the conditions, right? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. That was my fault.
You want me to redo that? I'm good now. I move that we approve, number one, approval of development permit DP 2017-133 with the following conditions.
Okay. Any comments? Have any comments or questions?
I'm 100% sure there will be an answer figured out. And I just don't think holding a particular development permit application hostage to the whole problem is the way I want to go with it. I just think that we don't need to hold this particular DP hostage to the answers we're going to get on the 21st.
Okay. Scott?
I have a similar view, but also that their wastewater, they have a solution. It's not the best one right at the moment, but they are paying for trucking, and it's paid for by the development themselves. So if they have more people within there, the costs go down. But I do know from being at the meeting that the people that live there definitely want the solution as much as we do. And by them forming a group and the homeowners association, they're going to develop even more power to do that. And
Donna?
How many are in that community now?
100 and some homes. Do you have a
Oh.
kind of a count there, Colton?
Through the chair, there's approximately 120 homes currently constructed in the Lakes of Murfield.
Okay. Thank you.
Amber, nothing? Jason?
I'm not 100% familiar with this topic, but I don't believe that we keep adding to the problem without having a solution to the waste water. And what's another 2 weeks? If we're going to get an answer on the 21st where we stand, can we not put this off until we have that definite answer? It's only 2 more weeks. It's not that much of a wait.
Ben? Yeah. I guess the Scott's question, if you want to put off, that would require a motion of some sort to table it. But we have a motion on. So it should have been done beforehand.
And
I'm
through the
thinking.
chair to council, it's not a problem to me if it goes through. 'Cause the other ones have gone through it. That's not the issue. The issue is that they've been pulling this for how many years now that we've been dealing with this, and they still do not have a permanent wastewater solution. And I know they're trying, and I know they're looking at one, and I know they've kept coming to us and telling us that, yeah, we do. And we've bought into it, and we've been allowing them for the last probably 6 months, 7 months, the developments without any opposition. I'm just saying, I'm going to throw some opposition back at them. I'm not saying stop the development. I'm just saying there's still some dissent as to what they've been trying to pull on. As far as I'm concerned, they're still, they come at us and they say, hurry, 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 we need this decision. They come in here and they give us all kinds of whatever you want to call it, and they need a decision within a week, and we have special meetings for it, we deal with it, we give them what they ask for, and then we get the same thing back again, time and time again. So I'm just saying, I just want them to know that everybody's not all that happy with it. I'm not saying stop the development, I'm just saying that it's not a unanimous decision.
Is the applicant in?
Through the chair, I believe the applicant is here. No, not this one.
Okay,
For a different lot? Okay.
okay. Any other comments, Tom? No.
How to word this? This development was approved as a whole many years ago, individual lots and whatnot. And the wastewater problem has been an ongoing issue, I agree, and I'm much the same. I don't want to hold individual people from stopping developing there, because ultimately we need it built out for the whole community to thrive. And if we stop it, they need the momentum to go in, and I believe they're starting that again. But I also do definitely want to have a wastewater solution there as well.
Donna? Amber? Jason?
I know there's already a motion on the floor, and as we don't want to stop the development, can we make an amendment to that motion? To prolong it till the 21st?
I think we have to realize that the people that are spending the money, and they're throwing out hundreds of thousands of dollars to build out here. They want a solution way worse than we want a solution, because we're not doing anything. We're just, I'm not even sure, I'll be honest, I'm not even sure why we even have to look at these ones. There's something in the back, and because when the development and our development, they've all agreed that these are all, we pay these people to okay these things and get the right permits and all this kind of stuff. And yet on this one area, we're sitting down there with the hammer, and I'm not even sure we should be allowed to have that hammer, because it's beyond most of our purviews. Like, most of us don't know what it takes to do a development. The development has been okayed. The development needs to be full in order for this thing to work, to get for the whole thing. So we're sitting down there, and we're going to decide on an individual's ability to put out a substantial amount of money to live in an area, and we're going to say that they're not going to take care of the water problems. They're going to take care of the water problems. I mean, it should never have got to this point, but it's to this point now, and people will not allow, when you're spending this kind of money, people are not going to continue the system as it is. They will find a solution. I don't think we have the right to hold them hostage. So
Okay.
I'm not changing the resolution.
Angie?
The motion.
Okay, Angie?
I'm just going to let Colton provide you with the legislative issues surrounding this issue right now.
Okay, go ahead, Colton.
Through the chair, under the Municipal Government Act, we have 40 days to render a decision on a development permit from when it's been deemed complete. This application was deemed complete on October 4th. With that being said, if a decision is not made within the 40 days of October 4th, then it's deemed refused. And because council's making a decision on this development permit, council's non-appealable, so this development permit would not be appealed to the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. So the decision before you is to either approve the development permit. If you choose not to make a decision, that deems it refused, or you can choose to refuse this development permit. In addition to that, on November 21st, staff is bringing forward an amendment to this direct control district to shift these uses back to permitted use. That was based on direction from council at committee of the whole meetings earlier this year for staff to amend the direct control district. When that comes forward on the 21st, council will have the decision whether to move forward with the amendments as is or request staff to make changes. I just wanted to provide that background for you. Thank you.
Okay. Ellen?
I would suggest you've got a motion on the floor. It doesn't sound like the person that moved that motion would like to change it at this time, so I would suggest you take a vote and move
And I'm
on.
thinking on the 21st, we'll get a better history of why it's in discretionary now, where the recommendations come from. And in fact, it is whose authority it is to do it and stuff. I'm prepared to wait till the 21st to hash it out more when the players are in the room, for sure. Okay, so the motion stands. Is there any other comment? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And we'll move on to request for decision, redevelopment permit 2017-134.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is much the same as the previous one. It's a development permit application. The owner is a numbered company. The applicant is Indus Homes. The plan is 0710284 on 613 Murfield Crescent. Staff's recommendation is that council approve option 1, development permit application 2017-134 with the following conditions: that the development's issued for a new residence defined as a dwelling single detached, that no variances have been granted. Number 3, development shall proceed according to the DC7 district requirements and must conform to the land use bylaw. And number 4, no permanent development shall occur on or over any utility right-of-way or easement. The standard notes that are applied to development permits in this area are here as well. This is another bungalow-style dwelling that's roughly 1,957 square feet and 27 feet in height. It's located within Cell 2 of the DC district. Council is responsible for the issuance of all development permits for discretionary uses within the direct control district. The 3 options for council's consideration are option 1, to approve the application, option 2, to refuse the application with reasons given, or option 3, to provide an alternative recommendation of council's choosing. I'll just go to the maps here. This is the location of the proposed house, the site plan, and this is the site photo of the lot. Let's go back up to my recommendation. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Colton. Scott?
I make a motion to approve option 1, approve the applications with conditions of development permit application DP 2017-134.
Okay, any comments? No comments? Donna? Ben?
No, just same comments as before. Just so that they know that there's still some question as to whether they're fulfilling their obligation is all.
Tom? No comment. Okay, any comments? Last chance. All in favor of Scott's motion? Opposed? It's carried. And request for decision, read DP 2017-137. Whenever you're ready, Colton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The owner of this DP for 137, the owner of the land is Kelly Custom Homes, and the applicant is Kelly Westrom. The legal description is Plan 071-0284, Block 166, and the address is 596 Murfield Crescent. Staff's recommendation is that council approve the development permit with the following conditions. The DP is for a new residence defined as a dwelling single detached. No variances have been granted. Development must conform and proceed according to the DC and the land use bylaw, and no permanent development shall occur on or over any utility right-of-way or easement. And then the standard notes for development permits in the Lakes of Murfield apply. This is for another bungalow that's roughly 1,670 square feet and 26 feet in height. The three options for council's consideration. Option 1, approve the application with conditions. Option 2, to refuse the application with reasons given. Or Option 3, provide an alternative recommendation of council's choosing. This property is also located within Cell 2, Residential Type 2 of the Direct Control District. As noted previously, council is responsible for all direct development permits for discretionary uses within DC 7. It meets the provisions of the land use bylaw, and it's deemed a discretionary use. Internal, the circulation comments were the same as the other two, with no issues other than a lack of a stable, standalone sewage disposal system from our Transportation and Infrastructure Department. Let's show the map. This is the location of the lot. The site plan, the approved. You'll see this is the IBI stamp for approved architectural controls, so the development officers always look for that when it comes in. And then this is a photo of the lot. I'll just go back up to my recommendation. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna?
I motion that council approve option number 1, approved of development permit application DP 2017-137 with the following conditions.
Okay, any comments?
No.
Amber? Ben?
No, same comments as the first one.
Okay. Todd? Scott? Developer here for this one? No? Okay. Okay. Any comments? All in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you. And that was the 1 o'clock, 1:30. Okay, we'll move down to we want to move down to reports, or do you want to discuss our 3 appointments this morning? Discuss the appointments from this morning? Okay, the first one to discuss is Community Futures Wild Rose. They had an ask of $3,000, I believe. Amber, your turn to talk about it. Now, our choices are we can grant them the money, we could get staff to prepare an RFD and research it out more, or you can make a motion, we can vote on it now. If you think you have enough information on it, we can go ahead. It's a tough position to be in right off the bat, but if you've been noticing, we've been doing a lot of, all our motions today so far have been RFDs. I don't know, it gives staff, we've only heard one side of the story, right? So it gives chance for staff to research it out a little bit more.
In response to the Community Futures Wild Rose request for support for metal fabrication industry labor market partnership, I request that staff provide further information in an RFD.
RFD, request for decision. Okay, is there any comments? Jason?
I liked what was proposed this morning. I think it would give great opportunity for the county and related areas. So I don't think it's a large amount asked for. I think it's a pretty modest sum. I would be in favor.
Okay. Ben?
I like the Amber's motion for the request for more information, because I'm split. I'm not sure whether or not we need to get involved with assisting industry in building and creating their own workforce, their own, I've always been a believer in entrepreneurship, and every time you get the government finger in there, they want twice as much as they give, 9 times out of 10. So I'd like to hear more, get more information on it first.
Okay, Tom? Scott?
I share a similar view as Ben, that a little more information would be necessary. The same reasons. I believe if the market bears it, it'll come. So.
Okay. Donna?
Yeah, more information would be good. I just wanted to make sure that the money was going to educate the people. I didn't get the impression that it was to help them to be governmentally involved. It would just be for the education. So maybe we need to clarify that. It was just to raise more education resources.
Any other comments? I guess too, for the one question was, see how we compare as a county with our processes and stuff with other places, see if we're throwing up anything either, right? In the way of hindrances or unnecessary hindrances. So anyway, Amber's moved that request for RFD. All in favor? Carried. Marcy Fields and the Economic Development Board to inform council. That motion was made already and it was approved to in the amount of the $10,000. Marcy was here to provide information, but this, if you're not in support of it, we could have another motion to change it, or what, Ellen?
It's also been included in the budget, Mr. Chairman.
It's also been included in the budget now. An unapproved budget that we're still working on. So if you're happy with that, we'll just move on to the next one.
I do think 10 grand is a little steep. I'd like to know exactly where that money's going, like how much each speaker is, what you're getting out of that, how many people are supposed to attend. Like, I don't think 10 grand is a very large sum of money, so I just want to make sure we're very aware of that.
They did include a budget in our package. I guess we'd have to refer back to that. But the budget was a lot more than $10,000. It was $60,000 and change, I believe. But they had other ambitions too. Plus, help me out here, selling seats for $99 a seat or something. It's just off my memory, but if you'd like to go back and visit that budget, we certainly could. Any other comments while I'm looking for it? Tom?
I'm sort of with Jason on this one. It just, if we can, I don't know, we can RFD this one? We can RFD this one?
We,
For our
I can
own-
bring back the information again. There is a
Yeah.
motion on that, but that's council's decision. If you want more information brought back,
Yeah.
because you maybe don't have all the information that you need, that's not a problem at all. There's no issue with
Yeah, I'm just not sure. Was it my mistake that I missed that information, or is it because it was already passed? I assumed when she was here giving her presentation that we were, that the 10,000 was how it corresponded within the budget, but I was unaware that a previous council had agreed on this one.
I didn't, not to hinder your judgment in any way, but it's, if they present it again And I guess any motion's only as good as the next meeting. So it's this council and it's this budget that's coming up and it's in the budget. So you still have a chance to take some ownership of it. So there is a budget on page 103, and if you'd like more information, we'll give staff some direction in what information you would like, or just have staff put together an RFD and.
Just another comment. I just don't want to give out 10 grand and then have nobody show up at this thing. Like, I want to make sure people are going to go there and listen to these speakers. I mean, if it's in Rosebud, the first one, how many people are going to drive to Rosebud for a speaker that is that much? Like, I just want to make sure it's worth our while to donate that money. We could reallocate that money to something that we see guaranteed to go on and improve something in our county.
We can, why don't we just ask staff to bring back some more information? That's your motion? Yeah.
I make a motion that we bring back more information on the Economic Development Board Subcommittee for the ask for $10,000 from the council.
In the form of an RFD?
In the form of RFD.
Okay, any questions? All in favor? Carried. County Christmas Hamper Society had an ask of $2,300 or about $3,300. Yeah, $3,300. Town provides $2,300 or $2,800, I think. I forget the number. Ben, your turn.
I would move that we approve the request for the funding for the Christmas Hamper Society. It's been a good program. It's been in there. It's only run for the Christmas season. I was part of it for quite a few years with my two sons, and it was well worth it. And I don't care what the town puts into it as long as we look after our share.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Any discussion? Just before we start, I'll ask Ellen, which reserve does this money come out of? Or
Comes out of donations. It's not out of reserve. It's a general
general
operating
thing?
account.
We have that one, Charles, is it Madsen, or is that
That
no
has
longer
nothing to
there?
do with this, Mr. Chairman.
It hasn't gone.
This
to
comes out of general operating.
just general operating, okay. Tom, any questions?
I too have been involved with these, and I think it's a very worthy contribution.
Scott?
Yes, I too have been involved in donated trucking for the past dozen years or so to this cause. So it is a very worthy cause. A lot of very good people help out a lot.
Good. Donna? Amber? Jason? Donna?
Just
Ben?
a comment to Al. When years ago, it came out of the Charlie Madsen. When did that change?
About 8 years ago, I think, 7 years ago, something like that. Yeah.
Why did it change?
Don't know. I'd have to talk to my predecessor on why that changed, but don't know. I can look that up, find out. It makes more sense to take it out of general operating because it is a general operating type of expense, but. So there's I think it's a $70,000 amount that council has discretion on using for donations, and that's where this has come out of in the last 7 or 8 years, so.
Okay. Do you still want to find out why it changed, Ben, or are you going to research that out a bit, or?
Well, it'd be interesting to know why it changed, because that was a resident from the Standard area who lived in Standard, ran a business in Standard. It was set up through his family as a trust fund for that type of thing. I'm just curious as to why it's gone away from that.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor? Carried. 1:30, a little after, we have an appointment interim budget presentation.
Good afternoon, Council. Through the chair, I was wondering if we could actually take a look at request for decision 4B III. I believe it would be very beneficial for Council to review the unaudited statement or financial statement of financial position as of September 30th, as this information could help guide and assist you with your decisions on the 2018 to 2020 budget.
Okay, that's page 159.
Yes, so it starts on page 159 of your agenda.
Okay.
Can you pull it up on the screen?
Turn for a motion. Tom's.
Motion that council accept
Information.
I motion that council accepts the unaudited financial statements as of September 30th, 2017 as information.
Thank you. Does there have any questions, Tom? Scott? A lot of numbers, I know. Donna? Amber? Jason?
I do just have a question. You budgeted, we came in under budget for the legislative expenses. I was just curious how.
Yes, so through the chair, these budgeted numbers, so what the practice that administration takes is we'll take the annual budget and sometimes we'll, on a case-by-case basis, we'll sometimes allocate the full budgeted amount to a certain month. But in other cases, we can't do that just because there's certain expenses that we just don't know throughout the year when they'll come. So this could be kind of a timing difference on why it's under or why it's over. And that's kind of the case for a lot of these expenses. So there's various expenses that the county incurs throughout the year that sometimes are just a liability. So these expenses are just kind of accrued at December 31st. Our goal is to provide council with very accurate and timely information to help assist in decision making. But some of these expenses we unfortunately just can't project or accrue every month.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. I'm new at this, so.
Oh, absolutely.
Ben? More? Huh? Yeah, I know. It says twice in the thing, but I'll. Okay, we got Tom moved. All in favor? Carried. Okay, Brian.
Just before Brian starts, I just wanted to explain to council just how our budget process works. So typically what ends up happening is council will approve an interim capital and operating budget, which under the Municipal Government Act, you need to approve, not necessarily an interim one. We call it interim because we like to understand where the projects are going. So typically it's been approved at the end of the year, by the end of December. And why it's interim is we don't know what our grant funding is going to be from the province, which makes a big part of our budget. The other thing is we don't know where our tax rates are going to be. So those don't get set till April, once we know where our grant funding and all that is. So that's how that's set. By setting an interim budget doesn't mean it's finalized, but it gives direction to staff to say work on road projects. So when Dave wants to do a road project, if there's design involved, usually that takes 3 or 4 months. We like to tender those in April, May, because we get a better price. If we delay those too long, we start tendering in September, the prices generally are not as favorable. So hopefully that kind of explains to you kind of what the process is. So the interim budget is not the final budget. Okay, the final budget doesn't get approved till April. So I don't know if you guys, as Ben wanted to add anything in that regards to that. But.
No questions? Okay, Brian.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So kind of to further on Alan's point, there's other expenditures that we can't control that we receive in 2017 for 2017. So the largest expenditure that we receive that we can control is the education levy. So that is an amount that the province provides to the county that we need to collect on behalf of them from our ratepayers. So that's just one other kind of thing I'd like to mention. As Alan mentioned, we do the process of the interim budget, then the final budget. So by doing those, the final budget will be as accurate as possible compared to the interim budget. So we can, at that point, when we know our updated grant funding, when we know the requisitions that we will receive, at that point we can adjust those into the final budget, then we'll provide a very accurate number to what to collect and what to help us assisting us determining how much tax revenue or other revenue we need to receive.
So I just wanted to add one other thing with the education tax. Been through it. 2009, the province of Alberta publicly stated there'd be no new taxes. They increased the education tax to municipalities 12%. Guess who wore the brunt of that? That has happened in the past many times. Maybe not to that extent. That's the extreme, but we've seen increases to education tax. And I'm not against education tax. I'm just letting you know that's out of your control. So when you set your budget, that's the way it works. As an example, Wheatland County puts about 25% more into education coffers than the town of Strathmore, even though we have less pupils in education. As an example, per capita, Wheatland County is about $1,400 per capita. The city of Calgary is about $300 and some per capita. So when the cities say that they're being mistreated in that, be very cautious on that. You need to look at all the numbers. They get a lot more grant funding than we do too. They get transportation grant funding and things that we can't get for transit systems and all that. So I'm not saying I'm against that. I'm just saying that's reality. So education tax, or whatever you want to call it, requisition, to me is a bit of a problem in this province because it's out of your control. So just be aware of that.
Okay, so what I thought I'd do today is that I thought I'd go over the package, some of the amounts in the package, some of the larger expenditure items, just to kind of give council an indication of the amounts that we spend in the budget and what we budget for. So in the budget, we have to follow the MGA. There's a couple sections, section 242 to 245, that includes capital and operating. There's various rules in there, and we ensure that we follow them to make sure we're in line with the MGA. So kind of the key to balancing the budget is we need total revenue plus total transfers from reserves minus total expenditures, transfers to reserves, plus amortization. So amortization is a non-cash expense. It's a large expense. We follow our amortization or our TCA policy, and with that we amortize our assets, and that's kind of why you'll see a little bit of a discrepancy that the expenditures are larger than our revenues, but you have to keep in mind that the expenditures, the amortization is a non-cash expense. Another item I thought I'd go over is just the account coding structure of a municipality. So our account coding structure, we have in the operating, we have 1 for revenue and 2 for expense. And then the second and third string items are our departments. So an example is 12 is administration, 21 is peace officers, and 23 is fire. And that can be found on page 167 of your agenda package. So that kind of just gives you an indication of what departments that we kind of have revenues and expenditures coming from. Also, the fourth string of numbers in our account coding structure, we try to keep these consistent with the rest of the departments. So an example here is that all of our wage accounts are 2100. So if you look under the administration budget, you'll find the wages coded to 2100. If you look under the planning department, the wages will be coded to 2100. If you look to the public works, it will be coded under either 31 or 3200. Or sorry, 32 the department, but 2100. So on page 165 of the agenda package, what we've kind of done is we have kind of given a summary of the larger expenditures, as I mentioned earlier. So these are the significant expenditures that the county incurs. So kind of within 10 lines, I've kind of summarized about 70% of the operating budget. So what I'll do is I'll kind of go through some of those items in the budget line by line. So the first item I'd like to discuss is the CRIS funding. So the CRIS funding is County Regional Services Infrastructure Program funding. So this is something that the county put in place back in 2015. And what this is it provides funding to other towns and hamlets that county residents use. This is kind of based on the population that uses it, and we kind of take the formula of the non-residential assessed value, and we take 2.5 of a mil and kind of assess that to that program and then divide it out by the service population. The second item I'd like to discuss, as we discussed earlier, is the education levy that we need to collect on behalf of the province. So as of right now, we don't know what the education levy will be. So what we kind of do, the practice that we undertake is that we'll take last year's and then we'll add on 1.5% just to kind of give us a ballpark number. At the final budget in April, this is when we'll confirm the number, and we'll have the information from the province at that point, then we'll add it into the final budget. Another requisition that we receive is from the Wheatland Housing Management Body. That's just a requisition we received. It's also based on equalized assessment as well. So there's the towns and villages within Wheatland County as well. They also pay a requisition towards that. And it's all based on assessed value. So the way that we came up with this one, or this amount, is we added 3% on last year's levy. Another item that is new to us, just due to legislation from the province, is the IDP ICF, so all the intermunicipal agreements. It's something that we have to complete over the next 2 years. This is a new item in 2018, so the cost of this is that we're projecting in 2018 is about $750,000. In 2019, we also have budgeted $750,000 as well. It's a cost that the county needs to incur in order to meet provincial legislation. The next item on the list is the fire association funding. So with that, we fund different hamlets that have fire associations that provide the essential service to the county. So that's based on, there's kind of 3 different places that we pull funding for. It's the operating and small equipment, the large equipment, and then a capital building fund. So kind of an overall, just brief explanation is that we take 1.1 of a mil of each class, or for every class, combined. So that kind of brings us up to about $1.7 million as an expenditure that we put aside. Another requisition that we, as a county, pay is the Drumheller and District Solid Waste requisition. So that's based on a per capita, and that's another item that we collect on behalf of the ratepayers. So last year was about $38 per capita, and that's about 8,300. So we added 3% inflation to that as well. As I mentioned before, the benefit of having a final budget is to firm that number up and then have the correct amount in the budget. Another item that we have in our budget is donations to organizations. So our previous council has 2 resolutions currently that we are to provide funding to the Strathmore Fieldhouse, $75,000 towards operating, and the Golden Hills School Division Gymnasium project for $125,000 a year. So under that line item in the budget, you'll find $200,000. An item that I have included in the 2000 budget, or sorry, administration has, sorry, is new in 2018 is a contracted service to determine the amount of our outstanding environmental liability. So for this, we need a contracted service to come in and assess the current contaminated sites that we have that are county-owned property. We're hoping to receive grant funding for this, or at least to offset some of it, but it is very important to determine the liability, to put a dollar number beside it, so that we know that our financial statements are correct, that we know kind of what we have outstanding. Another item I'd like to kind of note is the cancellation of taxes under administration. So from year to year, during the tax billing period, there's a 60-day assessment window, or appeal window, sorry, that a ratepayer can undertake, and they can dispute an assessed value if it's too high, so they can bring that back. So from year to year, we really don't know when a ratepayer will dispute their assessment value. So for this $200,000, what we do is we put an allowance into our budget just to mitigate any potential risks that we do have associated with that. Parts and fuel for our public works. Oops. So we have a lot of machinery here that do provide a lot of work and service for the county. So in that, we take actuals from up to current, and we kind of project those costs out. So we have projected $500,000. That's parts on any equipment that's used by any county vehicle or machinery or equipment. Also, another certain cost out of our control is our fuel costs. So with the fluctuating costs in commodities being diesel or fuel, it's harder for us to project what it will be, but we kind of ballpark it based on prior year. And if there's any, I guess, added taxes by the government, which was last year, there was a provincial carbon tax, which affects the county as well. So the next item on there is the operating wages. So at the county, given any different year, this past year we had 66 full-time salaried employees, 43 hourly employees, and 44 seasonal employees. So not included in this $9.5 million is some of our seasonal workers who work exclusively on capital projects. So those wages of those employees who work on capital projects are tied together with the capital budgets. So they work exclusively on roads, and those costs of wages and benefits are capitalized into those projects. So with that discussion, I'm going to kind of touch on point 3 of the summary, which is on page 165 of your agenda package. So there is 7 new positions that we have included in the budget. So what I've done is, to summarize for council's decision, is put in the position, the type of employee, the estimated annual salary, which would fall in our salary grid, which is approved by council, a rough number for benefits, and then the total. This is for your consideration. Note 1 on that, on point 3, is about ASB. So our current, that position currently exists, but he's a seasonal 11-month employee. It was recommended by our ASB board to move that to a full-time position. That, as mentioned, that position is 11 months currently, so. We also, with those operating wages, there's also benefits that are included into the budget. So the county participates in LAPP, which is Local Authorities Pension Plan. We have health and dental benefits, and then we also contribute to our mandatory benefits such as CPP, EI, and WCB. So that's about 2.1 million. Our insurance, we get all of our insurance through Jubilee Insurance. It's the provincial body that we take from the premiums. We take the bills from prior year, project a little bit of an increase as well. So in our current budget, we have about 303,000 for that. Our CURB funding, so that's for the Community Enhancement Review Board. That's for certain groups in the community that we provide funding to as well. In the budget this year, we have 443,000. The next point I'm going to touch on again is the amortization. I know I had briefly mentioned it before. So amortization is a non-cash expense, so it's an expense that the county doesn't pay money for. The reason why the amortization is included in the budget, one, because you have to for the MGA. Two, it kind of gives the indication of how much of your assets that you're using based on the useful lives which are set out in the TCA policy. So one way to kind of think of it is that, okay, we've got amortization of $13 million a year, but we're not transferring anything to our reserves this year. Well, you know, the net book value of those assets have gone down. The useful life of these assets have gone down. We should be providing for the future for these assets, for the replacement. And that policy is under 3.2, which is called the TCA policy. Okay, so that kind of summarizes the total, in the summary, 70% of the total operating expenses. So what I'm going to briefly touch on now is page 169 of page 169 of your agenda package. So in that package, what we've done for the tax revenue is we have increased the tax revenue from the actuals of 2017. There's 4 classes that you need to be aware of when we do our tax revenue. So we have residential and farmland, which we projected a 1% increase on the revenue itself. And then all other classes, we projected a 1.54% increase. So even though the tax revenue goes up by 1%, that doesn't necessarily mean that someone's residential tax bill will go up 1%, because as the county grows, our assessment base will grow. So that tax revenue gets, I guess, distributed among the different developments or and any new growth in the county. And I'm going to be talking about the breakdown of the county taxation revenue at just in a little bit. So our transfers to reserves, or to and from, sorry. So the transfers to reserve, currently what we have in the budget is 7.2 million. So we have about 3 million to equipment, some mandatory transfers to reserves based on like utilities, municipal reserves, and then some interest on those reserves as well, we transfer to right away based on the balances at the starting of the year. And then the transfers from reserve, we have about oops, sorry, I should move up. The transfers from reserve, we have 1.2 million in the operating budget. So another item that we do in the budget package is we'll have a changes to the budget page. So this is on page 166 of your agenda package. So kind of the purpose of this page is that we want to make it very clear of any changes that are made from the previous copy of the previous budget. So this page on 166 is from the interim draft 2 that was provided to council on October 10th. So this page, so you don't have to go through the 75 pages again to try to find the changes. We like to summarize them for you guys to make sure it's very clear what we have changed. So some of these changes, some are staff directed, some are directed by council input. So I'll just go through the changes here just to kind of provide you just maybe how this page works. I'm sure you guys can decide how it works. But so the first change is 1 and 2. That was staff direction. So I was discussing with our ASB manager about the staff wages, and we kind of decided to allocate 26,000 from one department to another. That's no change to the tax revenue at all. It's kind of just reallocating funds. The third and fourth change are postage, a change that was brought forward at one of our previous council meetings. So our utility bills currently are on a bi-monthly billing. So we changed that to go to monthly billing. So with that, there's an increased postage cost that the county will incur. So what we do is we try to capture all those changes and we try to bring them back in the budget. Okay, so on page 167 and 168 of your agenda package, this is kind of a summary for council to take a look at. And what it does, it provides you with an overall glance of different departments, where revenue is coming from, where the majority of expenses are coming from. So as mentioned, I'm going to come back and talk about our taxation revenue. So the taxation revenue for the county is about 89% or 90% of our total revenues. So this is kind of where all of our money comes in. So the breakdown of that, which can also be done by kind of reviewing the general ledger codes under the taxation tab 00, is that residential taxation makes up about 17% of our total tax revenue base. Farmland makes up about 7.2%. Machinery and equipment is 16%, and non-residential is 60%. Included in the non-residential amount is linear taxation, and that's a very big pot for the county. So that share of that, the overall budget is 41% is linear taxation. Other significant revenue sources in the budget include transfers from reserve, which is 1.2 million, as I discussed, and our interest income from our return on investments, which is around 635,000. So if you were to take a look at any department, just using this sheet, or the summary page, my apologies. So as you can see, 42.23 million is in the taxation for this year. Just some grants I'd like to talk about that we receive annually. We receive MSI operating every year from the province. That's one of our bigger operating grants. That's about 125,000 that we receive annually. We also receive about 240,000 in ASB grants, so that's grants provided by the province. This year, we were fortunate enough to have a provincial conditional grant for an additional 186,000. That was done by our ASB staff who applied and received the grant, and that's for some riparian zone repairs. We also receive other smaller grants such as employee grants for summer students and things like that, so those are all included as well. Just another item I'd like to note as well. When you're taking a look at this overall budget on the summary page, you'll see an amount, and one I have the example of is administration. So the administration budget is $17.7 million for 2018. And you may ask, why is it so high? So what I've kind of done is I've kind of backed out certain amounts that sometimes these costs just fall into, they have to default to a department. So these costs have kind of just defaulted to administration. So out of the $17.7 million under the administration budget, the education levy that we have to collect on behalf of the province, that's in there at $10.6 million. The CRIS funding that we provide to the towns and hamlets, that's $750,000. The Wheatland housing requisition, that's $277,000. The transfers to reserves are $1.3 million. The IDP and ICF estimated cost is another $750,000. And the allowance for tax cancellations and a contingency for another $100,000 is $300,000. And amortization of administrative assets is $344,000. So if you back all of those numbers out, you end up with an operating cost of $3.4 million. There's most likely other additional items in there that could be backed out, but those are kind of just the larger items that necessarily don't have an administrative function, but they just default to that department.
So just to clarify that, that's about 5% of this 60 million. So 5% is spent on administration, which is quite comparable with other municipalities. Private sector obviously would be a little different depending on what sector you're in, but.
Does anybody have any questions so far? We'll just.
Through the chair, I was at the point to ask any questions. My apologies for rambling on so long, but it's a lot of information to take in, and I understand that. Our intention today is not to approve the interim budget. Our intention today is to receive council direction or feedback and bring it back to the November 21st meeting.
Okay.
So at the November 21st meeting, we would probably be asking council to consider to adopt the interim budget so that we can move forward with some of our projects, keeping in mind that the final budget would be approved in April. So.
And the purpose of the interim budget is?
The interim budget gives basically direction on projects to start moving those forward. Some of those projects we need, like I say, 3 or 4 months lead time, particularly in Dave's area where, and I can let Dave speak to more about that, if he's going to tender a project, he needs to get that designed, right? So we do have a strategic planning session in December. We realize that some of the projects further out. This is 2018, 19, and 20. That's mandated by the new MGA that we need to do a 3-year budget. 2019 could be totally different next year. That can be revised, okay? So it's the 2018 one you want to look at more specifically than anything else. So, okay? And the capital budget, we need to approve a 5-year capital budget. We have a 10-year project, so we're in good stead on that. So council's always done that. So just keep in mind that 2019 and 2020, those are a lot easier to maneuver because we're not doing those projects right away. So.
Okay.
Also to note, when the final budget is approved, the interim budget is no longer valid. So that's in the MGA that once the final budget is approved, the interim budget no longer cease to have any, I guess, legislative power.
I want to also state one other thing. I know that it's always a struggle, and I've stated this many times before to municipal affairs, the election time is not the greatest time because you're throwing with a whole bunch of information. Yeah. That's not something we decided. That's where you guys need to talk to municipal affairs. I think it's New Brunswick. They have their elections in the spring. No time's a good time for farming and things like that, and I understand that. but in the spring's a lot better. We have a calendar year. We have to follow a calendar year. That's in the MGA. But if you imagine, if you just got elected in April, you have like 6 months to digest things. I apologize. We have no other option. We have to have a budget approved by the end of this year for next year. We don't have an option, and there's a lot of information, and I respect that. So all I can say is lobby the province to be able to change that, either when the election is, or that we can have a different fiscal year instead of the calendar year. That would certainly help this situation, and particularly in election years. Anyway, that's my rant for the day.
Okay. Dave, you had your hand up?
Yeah, through the chair. Brian, I'm wondering if you can give council members a little bit more detail on what our funding expectations are from the province. You mentioned MSI, but I know there's a few more than that, or at least I hope there are a few more.
So through the chair, I was saving that one until the capital budget, but that being said, so we receive other funding for capital projects. So we also received $3.6 million in capital funding for from the province, and then we received about $500,000 for capital projects for federal gas tax. So there's 2 grants at about $4.1 million that we receive annually. But that doesn't have anything to do with the operating budget. That has more capital.
Any other questions?
I would just like to thank you. There was a few things there that I was confused on because it was a large jump from the last, from the 2016 budget that you guys, like there's a large jump to 2017. So I just want to thank you for clarifying that for somebody who doesn't really know a lot about that stuff. So.
And our intent is to, any significant changes from prior year to current year is to identify those to council. Either if they're mandatory, we'll let you know as well. If they're not mandatory, we'll also provide that information. So a good example of a non-mandatory expense that I put in the budget is that environmental study for the contaminated sites that the county currently owns.
Yeah, like the one that I was, threw me for a loop, you could say, was the benefits, because it was a big jump from 2017, and from 15, 16, there wasn't a big jump. So I was just curious of why that was, and now that you say the new positions, that.
Any other questions? There was one account in here, I can't quite find it right now, about our development officer, 120,000 or something for a new hire. Is that in the operating? I can't find it.
Economic Development Officer, that's on the first page. Can you scroll to that, Brian? That's a new position. That's one of the 7 new positions that were identified.
169.
I think it's on page 165. It's on the screen if that helps, Mr. Chairman.
Not really.
Yes, so, whoops, let me see if I can zoom.
Second position, Economic Development Officer. So the first one, Greater Moore Operator, that's the 11-month position currently. That individual does the plastic recycling program in the wintertime and operates the mower grader grader in the summertime.
Right.
So the second one is the Economic Development Officer. That's one of the new positions. So keep in mind that's only a partial cost, because that would be hired in July. And the reason why we're saying July is because we're assuming that council would approve the final budget in April. We're not going to do any hiring on that particular position until the final budget's approved. Okay? So that position likely would come into place in July. That's only a partial year cost. So you have to keep in mind if that gets approved in 2019, you'll bear the full cost of that. So.
Okay, any questions?
I did just want to speak to that. I was thankful to see that in the budget because I did notice it was in the economic development strategy. I think maybe even with a goal like to have that for last year. And I know just talking to ratepayers that it seemed like there is support for that position. So thank you.
I guess for myself, last year we just started the economic committee we have a counselor on it and some ratepayers. And we're just going with that. And then we hire an economic development officer at a considerable expense, I'll say right now. I would have preferred, or I would have thought maybe there was merit in if our economic development committee could build a case for an economic development officer and grow it that way instead of, got an economic development officer. What's he expected to do? What's the job description going to be? I know that's all comes later, but I'm wondering if we're not jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit here. And maybe this money could be more utilized for guest speakers or something that the economic development team comes up with, because there really isn't any money in. I don't think we've allocated any money in for that committee, have we? For the economic development?
Mr. Chairman, the direction to include this in the budget was from council, the previous
I
council.
know.
And yes, in 2017 and in 2016, there was money allocated in there for economic development for the committee to operate.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just throwing it out there. We don't have to, just so you're aware of it. That's my feeling on it. When it comes to the final budget, it can be. Donna?
I got a chance to sit in with Mr. Parkinson. There was a lot of discussion on some developments and stuff, and I can see where that would pay off, to have a little bit more legwork and move things easier on some things that would help the county, like that they're looking into. It looked like it was just a few things that were discussed were like there would be a big projects, fairly big projects.
Oh, for sure. We've got lots of projects.
Just to add to it, yeah. Thanks.
Okay, is there any other questions or?
Is there any direction that council wants to provide to us on this? Because otherwise, I guess we're not hearing any changes.
That's right.
We'd bring back the same thing November 21st, so
Yeah, if there's no changes, you'll see it all over again.
it'll look exactly the same, I think.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I mean, there's no issue with that. We
Well,
just
there
wanted
might
to
be
hear you
different
guys'
questions come next.
Yeah, you're not setting the tax rate now. What we'll do is when we get into April, once all the grants are determined, then that's when you'd set the tax rate, and we'll bring in our assessment person who will do a nice long 2-hour presentation on how taxation works, but, so.
So typically, the interim budget allows staff to continue working until we get the main budget done. The main budget's done when we know all our numbers. Then when we get that set, we know what our assessment is. We set the tax rates and we fire out our tax notices and wait for the Amber.
I just do have one more question, and I probably just need information on it. The new position for a parks coordinator, what would that role entail?
So Angie Lucas has done a business case for that, so she can speak to that directly. And she can we have all the business cases for these positions, aside from the economic development position, which was a direction of council. So all the other ones, Angie can speak to some of those, and some of the other staff can speak to it, so.
I think it's probably just ignorance on my part, not knowing what it will involve.
Go ahead, Angie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the Parks Coordinator, briefly, would look after areas within the county which are not covered by any staff member at this point in time. Some of it is looked after sort of on the side of other people's desks, such as cemeteries, municipal reserve, environmental reserves, the Gleason Arena, community halls, libraries, etc. So we have a fairly large gap within the organization where we are not looking after our public lands and public buildings. So that would be part of that Parks Coordinator's job. Does that help a little bit, or have you got some more questions? No? Okay. It's probably not the greatest title, but yeah.
It could be more along the lines of recreation type facilities. So currently, like Angie said, the community groups are doing that, like in Carsland, Ag Society's running the arena and that, but they struggle with volunteers and that, and it's a big undertaking. Same in Gleason. There's great volunteers there and they're doing a fantastic job, but they need more support. And Angie and I are willing to support, but we just don't have the time to commit to that. It's off the corner of our desks, and we help as much as we can, but we're not helping and giving them the justice to keep those facilities operating in top shape. And those facilities are getting older and they need more maintenance too. So that's another aspect that we didn't see 20 or 30 years ago, right? So, and then in light of situations, unfortunately, like in Fernie, where, those types of things, the legislation requirements are going to increase as we move along, like anything, right? So it's just trying to be proactive on that, so.
Just on the economic development, like how much lead time do we need, like when you start advertising for that position?
Well, that's a good question, Tom. So typically what ends up happening is we would advertise it for a month. We'd start doing interviews, so that usually takes a couple of weeks to coordinate people to come in, and usually people need to give 2 weeks to a month of notice. So I usually use a rule of thumb about 3 months. So hence, if the council approves the budget in April, you got April, so you got May, June, July, we should be able to have it in place. 2.5 to 3 months is usually what I allow. And depends on the position. Economic development officer, I can tell you right now, we got 3 or 4 people that are willing to come here and do economic development for us, because I know quite a few people in the industry. They understand the area and they would be willing to start. I'm not saying that those are the people that would get hired, but there's a traction for Wheatland County. We're able to attract top-notch staff like you see in people like Brian and Angie and Dave and Mike. So as far as finding people, we'll have no problem finding them. It's finding the right person sometimes is a bit of the challenge. So.
I know when staff comes up with the parks coordinator, you have an idea what it's going to do. Council said we want an economic development officer, but didn't say what we expect it to do. And that's my concern, to hire somebody and just turn them loose, or we got to do a job description or.
Yep, I can give you a job description for that. It's not a problem if that's what council would.
Okay.
So choose.
I would be a lot happier.
We have an economic development strategy that portions of haven't been able to be completed, either by myself or by the Economic Development Board, but they can only do so much, right?
Right.
So far, it's been off the corner of my desk, and that's fine if that was the way you want to continue, but that's not a problem. Job description is no issue whatsoever.
Okay. Is that something the rest of? Okay, sure, please. Anything else? Operating. Any questions? I'm sure they'll come to you after. Write them down. This isn't the last meeting. Okay, continue, please, Brian.
Okay, so I'll briefly touch on the capital budget, which is on page 243 of your agenda package. So there's kind of different, the way this capital budget works is that for every line item in this budget is a specific project. So one line item could include everything for a building. It could be a piece of equipment. It could be a road. So all of those costs to construct and bring that asset up to completion and use is in that cost. So that kind of explains the expenditure part of it. And all those expenditures are going to be clearly labeled just in each section. So a similar format to the operating. There's going to be less lines, which will make it a little bit easier to read. Oops, let me just scroll over here. So any expenditure will start with a 6. And that's just kind of following the MGA as well. It's the very common account coding structure. So the revenues will always start with a 5. And there's certain places that we can receive capital revenue from. So there's current year operating funding, which is in our 2018 budget, which will be transferred to our reserves, and then we'll take that amount out of our restricted reserves and use that on a piece of capital equipment. Another source is prior year funds that were transferred into that restricted reserve to use against a specific item. The third is long-term debt. Long-term debt is just taking a loan. That's commonly not something that Wheatland County has done in the past. We just have usually had the funding to kind of self-fund our projects ourselves. And the other item that we briefly mentioned earlier is capital grants. So capital grants, the ones that we can count on annually are, for now, that I should say, is MSI operating, which comes, or MSI capital, which comes for the province. Our last year's allocation was 3.6 million. That could go up or down, say 200,000. We don't know those numbers yet. And the other one is federal gas tax, which I mentioned earlier as well, which is about 500,000. A general rule to follow for, oops, maybe I'll go back to the summary page, sorry. A general rule to follow for funding capital projects, which is very commonly used in other municipalities, is that we want to use grant funding first. So the way to look at grant funding is that grant funding is external money that the county currently doesn't have. We receive our allocation and use it to a current year project. And that's really all I have for capital items, or the capital budget. It's far more specific to specific projects. So all of those projects will be under any line item.
Questions? Sure, go ahead.
In expenditures for the paved roads, we gradually go up and budget higher until 2021, and then it drops substantially by 3 million. Just, would you mind elaborating on that a little?
Mr. Churchill can elaborate on that one.
Yeah, through the chair. That's basically because the length of the projects vary. Some years we do substantially more than others. And we're getting to a point as well too where we're going to start doing overlays on existing pavement. It's, again, a lot less expensive. So that's basically why.
It kind of follows our 10-year.
Yeah, a 10-year paving program, yes.
Which we'll be reviewing sometime in the future.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Mr. Chairman. So there is a 10-year program, and it's on our website, is it not?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Yeah, so I ask you to refer to that. Please bear in mind that 2018, obviously, if you guys give us direction to start with the budget, we'll be moving on forward on those as quickly as we can. So although we've changed gears in the past, a couple of years ago, we had a road that we were planning to do, and based on a ratepayer meeting in the area, it was determined to do a different road, and that was out in, actually in your division. So that there is some flexibility there. So we like to move forward on getting the engineering done in the wintertime and be able to hit the ground running in the spring. So I refer you to those and take a look at those. And if there's roads that are on there that you're questioning about, Dave's the guy that you can ask when we do the December 20th and 21st strategic planning. If there's roads that are on there, you're scratching your head, why aren't they on there? Then, bring them up at that time. That's a great time to bring it up.
Another item to note, so I believe it's section 248 in the MGA. It kind of talks about the expenditure of money. So there's 3 ways that administration can spend money, authorized to spend money. So it's in an approved interim or final budget. Council authorizes the expenditure of money, or in a legal, or I forget the terminology in that 3rd section, but there's 3 ways, and it's either the budget, council authorizes it, which can be outside of the budget as well, and just a legal obligation that the county is required to pay.
But just to be clear on that, and I've had councilors frustrated with that in the past, where as soon as you approve that budget, if you come to me, Jason as an example, and you say you want to do this, if it's not in the budget, you have to come back here and get approval. I can't do anything with that, right? Mm-hmm. We'll help you out. We'll assist you in putting together how that could be financed so that it can be explained to council. And that happens. It happens occasionally, where some project will come up in the middle of the year. and it needs to be added to the budget. But you guys are the ones that have final say on that. Once we get the budget, we move forward on what's in that budget. Any additions to that, totally up to you guys.
Another question. Oh, sorry.
And I was just going to add that they can be worked out as a rule too. If council's agreeable to it, we can find a way to proceed with it, yeah.
Yeah, one of the other examples I can give is like equipment purchases. So we budget a certain amount in the budget. Once the budget's approved, we have the authority to spend up to that. So sometimes if a tender comes in higher than we anticipate, we have to come back and say, oh, you know, like for whatever reason, dollar exchange has really hit us the last 2 years because a lot of our equipment's built in the U.S., right? So with the exchange rate increasing, and I just understand we just got another increase, it'll be proposed, I think, next week or something coming in place. So we've ordered quite a bit of equipment for next year, right, on the hope that, you know, you guys are going to approve the budget. Because if we don't, it's a huge hit when you're looking at $1 million piece of equipment. And the exchange rate changes 5 points. Yeah. So.
Okay, Jason?
Sorry, just one more question, and it's probably going to be pretty close to the same answer as I got, but the storm drainage as well, it drops from, in 2019, it is at 650,000 and drops down to 50,000 for the next year, which is pretty
I can
large.
speak to that one again through the chair. Again, this is project related. We have a huge project that we're working on next year and the following year, and then pretty much nothing after that. So that's why that one happened.
Okay. Go ahead, Alan.
The other thing I want to also mention too is as we get further out, like when we get 9 or 10 years out, that changes more, as you can appreciate, right? So it's not like we're throwing a dart at the board, but we're taking a very educated guess on what's going to happen, but things will change in the meantime, whether that's development pressures or whether there's issues with the road in particular that pop up that we're not aware of, those kinds of things. So you'll notice the next 3 years is usually pretty firm. As we get past that, it gets less and less firm as we move forward. It only makes sense.
And it's the pre-planning for this road has to be done, pipes moved, lines moved, you know, just to prepare, other people preparing so we can go in and do the work.
One of the other things that staff are going to be working on in the next year or so is doing an infrastructure audit of all of our infrastructure. So that hasn't been done for quite some time. So bringing in somebody to determine, particularly in Carsland and Gleason, the assets there, particularly water, wastewater, under the ground we don't see, we need to do another reassessment on that and see where we're at. As we found out a while ago, you know, there is leaks that happen. And sometimes it'd be nice if you could change out everything, but we can't afford to do that. So we have to plan it. Quite often it almost appears that we're not planning properly, but we're planning as best as we can. We don't know when there's going to be a break sometimes. So fires exasperate that because our firefighters go out there and use as much water as they can. And if there's a weak point, it'll show up when there's a fire being fought, obviously, right?
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead. You're done?
That was the,
Okay.
it's a lot shorter than the operating one. It's just, yeah, that's all I really have.
So, Mr. Chairman, if there's no other questions or changes, we'll bring back that information in this form along with the job description for the Economic Development Officer for November 21st. You still have the opportunity to ask questions and criticize it more or question it more if you so choose. But at this point, we need to continue to move forward on it, so we will.
And I'll even be so bold to say if you have any questions, ask Alan in the meantime, and he'll do his best to bring, if you have a specific question that comes to mind, go ahead.
So this isn't my budget, this is our budget.
Yeah.
For our ratepayers, right? So there's certain projects on there that you may or may not agree with. You gotta voice your concerns.
Go ahead, Tom.
Question. When do we have the discussion whether or not the county should have capital equipment?
That's a fantastic, that's been brought up before, Tom?
Right.
And that's December 20th and 21st. Okay, that's strategic planning and that's looking forward out a number of years, and there's all different kinds of positions. As you hear about the Economic Development Officer, there's some in favor, some against. It's all about working that through. So that's the time to bring those questions up, I would suggest, yeah.
Any other questions? Thinking we should have a motion to accept Brian's report as information. Donna? Okay, all in favor? I thought you put your hand up to vote. We're fast today. Carried. Go ahead. Sure, 5-minute break. So before we move on to reports, I was just going over my agenda, and our first appointment this morning was Russell Smith, and we haven't discussed that at any. And his wish was take into account the plight of seniors when we're raising their utility bills, which is a valid thing. And of course, if we do anything like that, it'd be part of budget discussions. So I don't know if you want to talk about that any bit now, or see Alan's got his light on.
So I'll just let Brian talk about what he's put in there for utilities. I think we've just put in what the existing rates are in utilities. So there's nothing reflected as far as increases going there. We will be switching to monthly billing, and I'll let Brian talk about when that's going to happen.
Okay, Brian, please.
Yes, so in my report, I briefly discuss how we're switching to monthly billing. The monthly billing we anticipate to start in March of 2018. So part of our rationale behind that is that we need to let the residents know that we are switching to monthly rates, or monthly billing, sorry. As far for the rates, we did just keep the revenue kind of stable for water and wastewater. Any increase that we do, we have to also recognize that this revenue is just a projection. So with an increased rate, the consumption may go down. So there's also that to take into account as well. Mm-hmm. There's also other factors out of our control, such as new developments, new account owners coming on to our system. That'll also increase the revenue as well. It's a very difficult number to project. Those numbers, we kind of just keep them fairly even. We're not at cost recovery at this point for our water or wastewater. I know that was a direction of previous council to move towards that, but at this point we have kind of just kept it status quo for the revenue with old rates.
Is there any questions or thoughts? Amber?
Just a comment for representing the residents of Gleason and having spoken to a fair number of them. There is a high percentage of people in Gleason that are on fixed incomes, whether because of disability or, like you mentioned, seniors. Mm-hmm. And I would advocate that if we do have sort of a principle or a strategy to move towards cost recovery, that we need to do that gradually, or I would advocate that we do that gradually, just so that the impact isn't as great, because it has had a significant impact on residents, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Alan?
Yeah, one of the other things, moving to monthly billing may assist some of those individuals. The other thing is we do have the program for water rebate for low-flow fixtures, and the county will pay a big cost of that, so that helps reduce their cost over the longer term. The other thing is I have worked with WFCSS on a number of occasions with people in communities and a few in Gleason to assist them. So we do have programs, not Wheatland County programs, but supported through WFCSS and other avenues that we can support them on that. So sometimes it's just a matter of knowing who's out there and who's needing some assistance. So, and we've done that on a number of occasions. So.
That is helpful. What some residents did notice, some of the basis of the challenge with the finances is not the usage per se, but just some of the flat rates that they're dealing with as well. So.
When I do my report, I'll talk about WID. WID wants to meet with council, and that's an opportunity to talk about conveyance, because the conveyance fee is fixed. We don't have a lot of control over that. So.
Through the chair, from the gentleman that was in this morning in the presentation, it was nice he came in, but I don't think he understood what he was trying to get at, and he couldn't hear from and no disrespect to the gentleman, but he couldn't hear. I don't think he understood a quarter of what was said in here. So I was wondering if you guys met with him, did you meet with him afterwards and sit down and talk to him about his, did he understand it when you got finished with him? Because he had the water line and the water rates and the sewer rates all tied together, and there's no connection between the two of them.
Right. So, and through the chair, I think he had a number of concerns. Primarily, as he brought up at the meeting, was that his his thought was that his water rate was consistent with what he was getting charged for wastewater. So I did go back with him and his partner there and explained it. And I do believe they understood me at the end of it all. They were nodding their head and as though they were in agreement. As far as what the rates were being charged, they still had concerns as far as their flat rates and the high level of rates, even though they are, if you look at them, comparable to other
Well, I
municipalities.
think it comes down to ability to pay. So
Yeah, I think so.
people are struggling with ability to pay. So yeah,
And
our
for-
rates are the lowest in the region, and we can show that time and time again. That doesn't mean that the ability to pay is any different for these individuals. So.
The bottom line that I gathered through conversations with people there is it was the drastic change, like that 100% increase in billing that happened. And when you're on a fixed income and that's, I don't know what percentage of your monthly income, that's significant for those people. I understand why it has to be done, and I understand that we are subsidizing it, like continuing to subsidize it. I think Russell's right that it's hard for us to imagine that impact. Like if we took it on our income and kind of scaled it to the same impact, it would be significant. But I realize we have to look out for the entire county as well, so.
I think, through the chair, I think the other thing too is through the MGA, the last few years, they've been telling municipalities, you must get your true costs up. And before that, it was easier to stay back and keep it more subsidized. But now with the MGA, with the government telling us that we have to get our costs back, and we have to start showing that, it gets harder and harder because everybody's been low, so you have to get them up there to subsidize them like we were. It's still costs. And
If I may, I appreciate that completely. And I realize that gradual increases, it would have taken like an exorbitant amount of time to get to where we are now. Yeah, I think it was just that it was I think also the timing of it is challenging because when we had the Wheatland Regional Corporation kind of at the same time as the increase in funding, some people are totally attributing it to that change, whereas it would have been a change that would have likely needed to happen whether Wheatland Regional Corporation came in or not. So some of it I think is a communication issue, and I'm not sure the best way to address that because I know it's challenging, but I do see communication as a key part of it.
Yeah, it's one of the things, it's a great point you bring up, Ben, because in Saskatchewan, municipal regulation, I've mentioned it before, they're regulated. They must report their revenues and expenses, and they must break even on utilities. And that's not very far away in this province, because Municipal Affairs has talked about that a number of times. Ontario is the same. So we may get forced down that road. So there may be other ways to deal with that, maybe more assistance through the WFCSS for people that are under advantage that don't have that ability. But to subsidize rates at this level, you may lose that control eventually, and it may not be that far away. I've been talking with Municipal Affairs and other organizations in the province, because it does create unfair competition when our rates are 83 cents and the City of Calgary charges whatever it is, $1.70, and Strathmore charges $2.35. Don't kid yourself. Municipal Affairs pays notice of that.
And I respect that, and I did communicate that through conversations with people. And once they were aware of that, some of it isn't just at this table where that push was coming from, that some of it is coming from more a provincial perspective, they respected that and understood that, but they didn't necessarily know that initially. So again, I think it goes back to that communication.
And some of these pushes are here already. When we were looking for our corporation, to get our corporation, we had to submit budgets, and that was part of line items to be sustainable. And sustainable is the new word. And another thing, just so you're aware and something to think about, as we start paying our water bill, the county will be getting a bill from Wheatland Water Corporation or Wheatland Regional Corporation. We'll get a bill, and that's for the water. And then we read our meters and we'll send our water bills out. When Rocky Ford gets their water and Standard gets their bill from the corporation, and if they're charging full recovery and we're not, we're going to get some flack or kickback from the villages too. We want to be the same. So there's some things we have a harder time being our own, and like Ellen says, maybe we come up with a different way to give assistance. Alan?
One of the other things that the new councillors maybe are aware of, but maybe we'll let you know this, the waterline project, essentially the phase 2, or phase 1, sorry, from Standard to Gleason and all the components of it is about $22 million. That's a lot of money. Wheatland County paid 1.8 million of that. The rest came from government grants, and I know there's only one taxpayer. However, if Wheatland County would have went alone on rebuilt that plant in Gleason, which it needs to be rebuilt, we all know that. We've heard about concerns with the water on that, and we were living on borrowed time. We weren't meeting the legislation requirements. Not that the water wasn't safe to drink, it was. That would have cost at least 4.8 million. So Wheatland County saved $3 million by doing this regional corporation. Over and above that is the operational savings in the longer term. But I don't know what those will be. There's a report on that if you want that the
We've done a study on that,
It was
yeah.
done about before my time, so I don't know where. when
Ask
that was done.
Mike.
But this has been in the works for a number of years, so.
And I understand that, and I tried to explain some of that to some of the residents. I'm wondering if there's a way in layman's simple terms to send some of that information out, maybe with some of the water billing, or maybe they won't read it in water billing. And when I was communicating with residents, I also said they have a responsibility to seek information, just as we have a responsibility to provide the information. But if there's a way that we can provide that simply, just so that like a layperson could understand that point in particular.
2 billing periods before the water rates were increased, there was correspondence put in every water bill explaining to residents about these different programs. Not so much about the regional water, but there was information in there, and I'm sure Councillor Bigger received some of that as well. We can certainly do more on the regional water, because it seems like there's confusion on that. That would only affect certain areas at this point, but we certainly could do that. Yep.
I think whether it's accurate or not, a number of the residents attribute the increase in costs to the Wheatland Regional Corporation and don't acknowledge that there would have been a necessary increase, whether that was the route taken or not. So I don't know how you communicate that simply, but directly.
We have a communications person here that she'll take care of it for us.
And I think it's important to note the 1.8 million we put in for the phase 1 was also grant money. It wasn't tax money from this thing. And I know we keep saying, oh, it's tax money, we're still taxpayers. But I'll go back to when Ellen was talking about the school tax. There's a huge amount of tax money leaves this county every year. We get a little bit of linear, the province gets more, and it's gone. And we get very little of it back. And this was our turn to get a nice project back. So it's for the future, for sure. Alan?
Just one other thing, working in other communities, I do know that back in 1972, I think it was, the province of Alberta came up with, I believe it was 14 regional water systems in the province. So this is fulfillment of that promise that was made to the citizens in Alberta. They wanted to have 95% of the population or 98% of the population on regional water systems. We're still a little ways away, but if you've seen that report, I think it was from the 70s. 1972 rings a bell, but I might be wrong on the date. But so the province is very dedicated to this, and they will continue to fund this project for the next legs to Hazar, to Redland, to other, maybe Clooney or something in the future. I'm not sure, but they will continue to fund this project.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike. Oh, did you have a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom. I'm a
And
little slow.
I'm not sure who we asked the question of. These other water corporations, for lack of water co-ops, like they have in Cypress Hills, are they equally like subsidized? Because I'm just trying to figure out how you're going to sell this. Like I think I think the number, it costs us $3.40 a cube to produce drinkable water, right?
That's what it's going to under the corporation,
Right.
yes.
So we're selling it to the people in Gleason for 167.
168, that's correct.
Okay. And then, so we're subsidizing, people in Standard are going to really be choked because they're going to, like, so there's.
That's what Glenn's saying.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
And that's why in
and
Saskatchewan.
I don't feel sorry for the people at Standard Rockford, don't get me wrong. I'm just wondering why we didn't go in on the higher end, like Like, why the 168, why was 168 magic? Like,
There's no magic to it. I think it was a matter of phasing it in. And so we thought that was a logical place to phase it in. Whether, I mean, you could debate that. When you look at Aqua 7, their rates are considerably higher. If you look at City of Edmonton, the minute the water leaves the City of Edmonton and goes to a place like Tollfield, it's $3.10. That was like 5 years ago. I think it's closer to $3.50. So the $3.40 is pretty consistent throughout the province. Calgary's unique because they own their own water rights. They're the only municipality in Alberta that owns their own water rights, and how they got that deal is up for discussion, but we won't go down that road. So that helps them in keeping their costs a little bit lower than other municipalities. So I don't know what else to say aside from, we know we need to get closer to that. The province, if they tell us that we have to, then we have no choice, and then we have to come up with other ways to deal with it. But at this
Yeah, and
point,
some of these, our water rates are old rates that we just increased by 10% over time. We had no rhyme or reason what the first rate was, I don't think. It just kept going on for years and years, and that's what happens when you don't pay attention. But yeah, it'll give us time to think about it for sure. Mike?
Actually, I was just going to add on that point you just made there. I noticed Councillor Link had just mentioned in some of the conversations, and maybe other of you have had the same conversations with the ratepayers. So the increase was fairly large based on the per cube rate. We increased that quite a bit. The flat rates, everything else went up 10%. So we didn't increase any of those any more than the standard 10. We wanted to put those costs back on the users that use the system. So even though the rates were substantially higher, and it was kind of a double-edged sword this year, obviously, too, because in the summer, I mean, the amount of calls that we got after that July bill came out because people were irrigating all of the land. So it was quite a bit of a shock for those folks there. I think next year, now that we've seen that past experience, I think there'll be a lot more conservative use of that water.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, just to what Mike has said, in Edmonton, they put a regional water line back in it was probably back in the 70s or 80s when they did that. And that line was supposed to be good for 25 years. And as Mike said, the conservation portion of that, they thought they would be adding to that line. They've added more municipalities and more line to it, and they still have space in that line simply because of the people understanding and recognizing the use of that and going to recognized savings in their water use. So they still have room on the original line that they didn't think they'd have over 25 years. So the people do catch on after a while. Once they start paying for what the real cost of it is, they start really paying attention to how they use that water. So,
and we know from that study that was done, whatever, 5 or 6 years ago, that Gleason, comparative to the province, is considerably higher, like 40 to 50% higher usage than other municipalities in the province. And some of that has to do with low water rates, has encouraged them to not conserve as much as ours, probably a lot worse because they don't even have meters there, but I won't go down that road. That's like Tom's comment about Standard and Rockford. I guess we won't worry about that.
Okay. Any other comments? Go ahead, Scott.
Something else from personal experience with regional water lines is the unaccounted water, fire departments, things like that. I know the Aqua 7 line, for instance, would give a bill to a municipality. It included everything that went to the town. So anything that went through the fire department for fire practice or whatever, that was unaccounted water, and basically the municipality makes up that difference. Mm-hmm. It can add up to a lot with the recent fires we've had. There's a lot of money. It adds up fast.
Okay, I just say it's nice we got water. We got good water and we have lots of it. Firefighters. The recent fire in Galician, I think that started out, our reservoirs were less than half full. They're never full. And they started the fire, and within 3 hours, both reservoirs were full. Clear wells were full in Galician and Standard. And the fire departments couldn't pump the reservoir down in Galician. It's a lot of water. So, yeah, it's as much as was built for what was there, the 125% it was working at, and no problem, so yeah, that's good. Anything else, Mike, or? I think you weren't in here and we were talking about the cost of plants and stuff, and how much it costs to build a plant, how much the county paid, one for Gleason standalone. But the cost for having one plant versus 3 plants, the operation was huge too, when you share that savings.
Definitely through the chair, that's where our major savings are. It's not so much the short-term costs, which are substantial when you look at a standalone as opposed to, I mean, with the 90% funding, of course, it adds quite a bit. But it's the long term, it's the 25, 30 year. Trying to find qualified operators that are willing to stay in the region is going to be a bigger and bigger challenge as we go forward. So that's why Alberta Environment and Transportation is stressing these regional plants, and that's why we're signing on with them, because it makes sense, big picture.
Okay. So we'll just keep that in mind when we're talking budget and water and stuff for Russell and their concerns for sure. And maybe for Russell, and I know Mike tried talking to him, maybe it might take a letter in the end, or when we get something more definite, say Christmas time, something to think about. Okay, I'll move on to the Reeves report. While Lisa is here, we had a Wademza meeting last night, and we talked turn to fire and how inundated the 911 call center was. They had 3 times the staff there, and they couldn't keep up. But they had nothing but kudos for Wheatland County staff for the Emergency Operations Center. It was run professional. They had nothing but kudos. And what they found as a big help for them as well as residents, and they're hearing talk out in public, is our website and social media, how that kept up. It was a constant source of information because town phone lines were tied up. People really appreciated that. So I just pass along to staff right now. I'd like to thank, I put a letter out there, I sent it to Ellen, I knew you'd send it to everybody about Rosebud resident and getting snow plowed off. I've thanked for them responses, now I can have something to give to my resident about the way life is. And I think that's all I'm going to talk about right now. All the rest of my reports will start coming in on the computer so you'll have to wait till next month.
Reeve Kester, can I just ask a question in response to
Sure.
your inquiry from your
Yeah.
Rosebud resident? Should we be putting forth some kind of response, like to Alberta Transportation in that document that says municipalities are responsible for clearing? Because I found it is in there.
Okay, Ellen?
Yeah, we get a few of these requests over the year, and generally, we respond to them from staff, right? Put a communication out on that, we could certainly do that. I don't know how many people would read that. Well, you're meeting with Alberta Transportation in Edmonton? Good time to bring that up.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll add it on to the list for sure.
Makes sense?
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? I'll move my report. All in favor? Carried. Deputy Reeves report. I believe it's on the server. No, it's not. It's a handout.
The handout. Just the one meeting that I attended with Reeve Kester. I asked him to come help with it just because of the background in it. Already talked to some of this about the HOA, what basically the idea is from it. There was the talk of the wastewater and the response back from Mr. Souza, who is a representative of the developer. More for information.
Questions? I have one for council. Scott asked me to come to the meeting. Yeah, I didn't have a problem going to the meeting. I don't want to say when you're new or anything like that, but if you ever need help or need somebody to come to a meeting with, yeah, give us a phone call or Ben. That would be good. But it's out of our division, and I did put it down on my timesheet, and I don't know if that's allowed or not. I didn't have a motion for it. Usually anything within our divisions is your per diem covers that, your salary. When you travel outside of, it's just extra, is for sure. So I did that at that time. I don't want it not to ask, but in the same sense, I'd like to, recover for my expenses and my time too. So does anybody have any trouble or any problem with that, or any discussion, or? Maybe a motion would be nice, yeah.
I move that per diem be available if the Reeve attends meetings outside of his division to support fellow councillors.
Okay. And it'll be a short-term thing, I'm thinking.
I would ask you to amend and include Ben as well.
Yeah.
Actually, I looked at it. I thought of it. Yes. Yeah, we are. So you would be reimbursed if Glenn couldn't attend a meeting and we wanted.
Yeah. Okay. Margaret? Ongoing for the short term, I guess, half a year. Okay, 6 months. 6 months enough? 4 months? A date, put a date. April 1st, okay. Any questions? All in favor? Carried, thank you. Okay, Scott, anything? Any good questions for Scott? Your report? Okay, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Did you vote, Scott? Okay. Division 7 Council Report, month of October.
It's on, excuse me, it's on your server. And the addition that it was a late meeting when I handed this in. It was the late meeting, so it's a handout that I sent Margaret on the SEWA. What page is it on? Oh, 144.
144.
Oh, thank you.
And just as a comment, the wife asked me, she said, why are you putting all this, why do you always put this in here that you went to a council meeting or you went to, everybody goes to them. And I said, yeah, I know they do, but I said, this isn't for council, this is for the ratepayers that look at it. I want to know what the hell I'm doing. So I said, that's what it's on there for. If you want any information on it, I just put that I went there. I didn't put any information for it. But the other ones, the information is there. And if there's no questions, I'll move it.
Any questions for Ben? Moving your report, Ben? All in favor? Carried. CAO report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is in the package, but I've got a few other things I would like to add in if possible in my report. First one, WID has requested a conversation with Mr. McAllister from the WID, and we'd like to have a joint meeting, council and WID board like we did last year. And available dates for the WID board, they're willing to meet during the day or evening of the 23rd, 28th, 29th, or 30th. So like direction from council on which date or dates would work best for council.
Sorry, What were them dates again, Alan?
November 23rd, 28th, 29th, or 30th?
Daytime?
30th is out. So no to the 30th, okay. How about the 28th, 29th, or 23rd, which, is it those
I
dates? available?
prefer not the 29th.
Okay, so the 29th is out, so down to 23rd and 28th. 28th?
28th?
Anybody have an objection to the 28th? Okay, I will confirm with them the 28th. During the day or evening, what would you prefer?
I won't be here on the 28th.
Okay. Okay, so you want it during the day?
Yeah.
What time would be the best for everybody?
In the morning.
Morning?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock?
I can come at 9 for a bed.
Okay, I will set that up with Mr. McAllister, and I'll send out a calendar invite to everybody for the 28th at 9 o'clock. So that's the first point of business. The second point of business would be to do with follow-up from my email today in regards to the meeting that Councillor Bigger, myself, Judy Unsworth, and Staff Sergeant O'Dwyer had yesterday in regards to the wildfires. So the Grassland Wildfire Operation SG1 or S100G course, we will be conducting that course in Carsland and Gleason in the next couple months for residents and farmers so that they understand, particularly it's things like this Beaufort wind scale and how that affects the parameters of a fire. Okay, so this is a certificate course that our staff will put on for those residents. Also, in regards to the fires, I would.
Staff is going to put that course on?
Yes, yeah.
So coming to the new year, we can offer it to different areas of the county too?
And like I said, Gleason and Carsland will be the first two, and we'll probably go out to those two different communities and offer it there, and we'll see what kind of response we get. Based on that, we'll decide if we want to go to Rosebud and some other areas, agricultural areas. So. Okay, the other thing I wanted to bring up in regards to the fires, a number of residents have uninsured losses, such as fencing and things like that. And I know that some of the residents have talked to you folks. So there's a couple different programs that the province of Alberta has. Municipal Wildfire Assistance Program. Wheatland County has applied for that. This is only available to municipalities. It's not available to individuals, okay? So that won't help the individuals. However, there is a disaster recovery program. The disaster recovery program was established a number of years back for overland drainage. So I'll just read what we received from Alberta Emergency Management Agency, and I'll give you my recommendation of what council may want to consider. The recovery branch of Alberta Emergency Management Agency administers both the disaster recovery program and the Municipal Wildfire Assistance Program. AEMA Recovery Branch provides assistance in the event meets the criteria outlined in the following section. Section 4.1 of the Disaster Recovery Regulation. The minister may approve a disaster recovery program in respect of a disaster if the minister is satisfied that A, the disaster has caused widespread damage to property, and B, the cause of disaster was extraordinary. Section 9 also says an applicant is ineligible to receive compensation for damage or loss caused by a widespread or localized disaster or for costs incurred in conducting emergency operations if A, the damages, loss of or costs could have been reasonably prevented, B, insurance for the damage, loss or costs was reasonably and readily available before the disaster emergency occurred, C, there is a substantial likelihood that the damage, loss, or cost could be recovered through legal action, or D, the full amount of the damage, loss, or cost is available under Government Alberta programs. So those are the criteria that it meets. The disaster recovery program is a program that I'm familiar with. In 2010, the municipality I worked with did make application and were successful in that. And that was totally to do with overland drainage issues, not with wildfire issues. So my recommendation to council is to make a motion to send a letter of correspondence to Alberta Emergency Management Agency requesting that they consider funding non-insured matters through the disaster recovery program. So that would be my recommendation. There's no guarantees that that's going to happen, but that would be my recommendation.
Okay. And do that right now. Amber has moved. Is there any questions? All in favor? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
And in follow-up to the fire, I received an email from our emergency management coordinator about an hour ago that the cause of the fire has likely been determined. So there will be a report that will follow up. And that was done by the Provincial Fire Commissioner's Office, independent of the Wheatland County. So it would appear there may be more than one cause for that fire. So once that report's available, then we'll provide that to council.
Okay.
Maybe in the next day or two. So.
Okay, thank you.
The next thing I have, I guess, so that's my report, Mr. Chairman. There is an addition to the orientation binder that we would ask you that you put into your orientation binder. It's new information from Alberta Municipal Affairs. So there is a package for each one. Just take one and pass them on, please. So that's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there any questions for your CAO? Motion to accept the CAO's report. Where am I? Scott?
I'll make the motion to accept.
Scott has moved. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, Ellen. Counselor Tour, CAO on Wheatland County facilities.
So what I would like to do is do an orientation, safety orientation with council and do a tour of our facilities, both in this building, the Public Works shop and the ASB shop. So I would like an opportunity to do that with council, and I guess that includes all of council, including yourself, Glenn, and Councillor Armstrong, if you are available. So I just need a date for that when council could work that out. So
How much time do you think you'd want?
probably 3 hours max, 2 to 3 hours.
Okay.
Depends how many questions you guys ask.
What's your feelings? I'll just
The orientation takes about half an hour, the safety orientation before we go on site. So
try shoes on. Do we have to try shoes on?
if you don't have safety-toed boots, yes.
Okay. What's your wishes? Jason, go ahead.
Next week sometime? Is
Next week, most people are in convention.
like Monday?
Monday? I can look at the schedule. If
No?
that works. No?
Just kidding.
Could we possibly do it prior to like a council meeting on the 21st? Just meet earlier,
If you're willing to come in at 7, yes, we could.
7 or 8?
It's going to take more than an hour to go through.
Through the chair, when's our next ag service meeting? Is that December the 6th?
It's not until January.
Did we have one in November?
Yes.
October, oh, that's right, it's not every 2 months, okay, that's fine, sorry.
I'm not sure. January 10th. Everybody's telling me January 10th. It'll be at 1 o'clock. So there's a meeting in the morning from 9 till noon, essentially, and then 1 o'clock. That's good. Everybody's good with that? Okay. So maybe a motion, Mr. Chairman, for council to attend that and get reimbursed for that would be in order.
So moved.
Okay, so my report is on page 155 and 156 of your agenda package. There's not much else I'd like to include. The majority of the work was into the budget and into the unaudited financial statements as of September 30th. And typically those statements are done approximately 1 month behind, just so it allows us to post our items that come in. So invoices don't come in on October 2nd for September 30th. It gives us a little bit of a time to collect, post, and update the general ledger.
I move that the council accepts the corporate and financial service report as information.
Yes, so on page 157 and 158 of your agenda package, we've included the 5 roll numbers that are required to have a reserve bid that are over 3 years in arrears of taxes. So the county annually holds a property auction for any accounts over 3 years in tax arrears.
I move that council accept the reserve bid and conditions for property tax auction.
Brian, would you like to explain the tax auction, why they come up for tax auction, or would you like me to do it?
You can go ahead. If you'd like, I can as well. So what happens here is that we send out tax notices every year. We try to make, and over these years, if someone becomes in arrears of over 3 years, at that point, it's mandated by the MGA that we need to put these properties up for auction to recover taxes, and anything in excess, the owner of that property can make an application to receive the excess funds back from the county. So some parcels that end up on, there's a variety of different parcels that can end up on in the tax auction for various reasons. So there's different parcels of land throughout the county. So some can be parcels that are underwater, that are a very small parcel of land. That's one good example of a parcel that goes to auction. Other can be residential, non-residential. I don't believe there's any habitable dwellings on this the reserve bid and conditions at this point. So that's one item. So and we do go through the process of contacting ratepayers if possible, making tax agreements. If someone comes in a tax agreement with the county as well, they are removed from this list as long as they continue with the tax agreement that's in place. So the reserve is set, the MGA states that we must set a reserve, the reserve bid. So the reserve bid must be fair market value. So our assessor, he works on the fair market value of those bids. So what that kind of does is it allows the reserve bid. An example would be, let's say that there was a property worth $150,000 that was up for auction are 126,000. So the reserve allows, or I guess it's maybe a safety net, so someone doesn't take over this property for $1 and the county can recover the outstanding taxes.
Just to follow up to what Glenn said, what happens if you don't meet the reserve? Like the bottom one, there's $126,000. What happens if you don't meet the reserve? What happens then?
So any items that are not, that do not meet the reserve bid, the reserve and the tax auction is, I guess, an avenue for public to come bid on these properties. If the reserve is not met, the property becomes, the county has the ability to take that property over. The county also has, or the land title comes into the name of the county. There's other options. Let's just say, for example, there's a parcel of land that is contaminated and the owner knows it. So the owner does not want to pay taxes on it because they don't want the land anymore because there's a significant liability on the land. The county isn't required to take that land over either. So it kind of sits back with the owner at that point. So I guess, my apologies for rambling on. To answer your question, if the reserve bid is not met, the county has the right to acquire the ownership of that land. Yeah, those were approved prior to the budget.
I already got that as information. Thank you, Brian. Transportation Infrastructure Services, request for decision, Transportation and Infrastructure Service Report. Page,
Good.
what, 278?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dave.
Yeah, my report's on your laptops. There's just the two updates that I have today. I didn't include the gravel crushing that we're doing down at the Christensen gravel pit. We've completed the half-inch gravel that we use for doing our seal coat, the chips for the seal coating. We crushed 10,000 ton there, and we're about probably about 60% through the 3/4 inch gravel for the roads at about 50,000 tone. So that's coming along. We should be done here before the end of the month. The other item that I wanted to give you an update on was the addition to the shop. We're getting really close to getting it closed in for the winter. I saw that they were working on the last overhead door there today. There was issues with the delivery on that, so they should be closed in here soon. And I think everything else is up to date on that, so that's my report.
Questions?
I just have one question. It's directed at Donna. On the Foran equipment that is doing the, have you had any, like, that is doing the main replacement in Carsland? Have you had any feedback on that? Or are people generally happy with the company and all this kind of stuff? Or like in the...
I believe that's been going quite smoothly. It's been going quite smoothly, the work there, yeah.
Other questions? A motion for Dave's report. Your turn, Donna.
The council accepts the general manager of Transportation and Infrastructure Services.
Okay, any
As of today.
questions? All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
And Wheatland County Transfer Site, hour of operation.
Mr. Chairman, I just include this as information. Councillor Wilson had asked a couple questions in regards to this. We've just switched to our winter hours, so Mike's here and Dave can answer any questions in regards to that, so.
Sorry, I don't know the winter hours. I knew the summer hours for the Clooney waste transfer site. I'm just trying to grab the winter hours.
Yeah, they're on the same page here.
Oh, it's there.
On page 280.
280. Oh, wrong one. Right there. Yeah, it was brought to my attention by a few of the ratepayers around there that they don't have a chance. They're okay with only having 2 days, and I said that's to have more than that doesn't make sense. But a lot of the times you have people not being able to get to the waste transfer site until after work, which is 5, which is a lot of people don't get home till 5. And here you don't have the transfer site opening until opening after 5. So like even on a weekend, those who work are home on the weekends, but a lot have kids in certain recreational sports and are busy on the weekends that can't make their dump day, as most people say. So I was just hoping to try to move the hours around to incorporate an hour or an hour and a half after 5 o'clock during a weekday, so people that work 9 to 5 are able to get to the waste transfer site during the week.
Okay, great. So through the chair, I guess looking back, the basis of why we set these hours where they were, you see there's actually another additional attachment to the report there. It kind of just gives the 2016 waste transfer site traffic counts. You can just kind of see the level that Gleason or that Clooney and Rosebud are at compared to the other sites. That's why you'll see a lot more hours for the other sites to be open. We reduced the hours in Clooney last year. We took away 1 day just to try and recover some of the costs that we're doing exponentially bigger to run the Clooney site than any other sites when you're looking at per capita basis. So as far as the hours and where they're set, truthfully, we've gone back and forth quite a few times over the number of years here based on ratepayer requests. We have altered the hours quite a few times. We've been 12 to 8, 10 to 6 in all of these sites. So this is, I guess, our latest revision here, our latest proposal on these. And strictly, the reason that we lowered these, for the most part, most of the sites are only open till 5 in the winter, is safety, is their number one concern. These sites, sunsets in December at 4:30, and many of these sites are very poorly lit. We do have some money in the budget last year and this year to improve the lighting on those, but you got to open bins, you have sharp objects, and pitch black in a lot of areas of these things. So that's why we limited them in the winter to 5 p.m. You'll see there's a couple of the busier sites are open till 6, but the majority of the slower sites are 5. So that's kind of the basis. As this conversation came up, we are now looking at, well, maybe there's an option to have, because in the summer, I see a lot more need for these sites to stay open than in the winter. So a 5 o'clock closing in the summer, looking at it now, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So we were looking at possibly revising again at 10 to 6 summer, all across the board, and 9 to 5 in the winter, all across the board, just to keep it consistent. Because I think the number one concern that I've heard is just the lack of consistency in the different sites and when they're open and people showing up at the wrong time. So to have it more consistent and across the board there, I think is more the direction I was looking at. I mean, it's definitely a council request that we can implement, but That's just where we came from on the decision for that.
Yeah, no, that, I'm good with the winter hours changing. I understand the safety aspect, but like you said, the 5 o'clock in the summer just doesn't quite make sense. During the weekend it might, but yeah, just during the week, it wouldn't be bad to bump it up. You don't have to add hours, you can just move them around. Like, cause I understand, like, I go to Clooney Dump, there's nobody there, right? Like, very rare. So you don't want to pay somebody to sit there for no reason. But yeah, if you could just move the hours around to make it more efficient for the people around there, so.
And through the chair, just for information, for council's information, they are no longer dumps, they are transfer sites.
So you're more concerned about the summer hours then?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other comments you wanted to make, Jason or Dave?
Through the chair, there's also another option that they could take their garbage, to Gleason, because they're open till later. They're open till 6, I believe. So you could offer that to them as an option.
Okay, oh, I'm fully in favor of that, but so safety reasons, you have a dump, the Gleason dump's open to 6. The Gleason transfer site is open to 6, but for safety reasons, you can't open the Clooney transfer site to later?
Yeah, and that's why I said some of the busier sites and Gleason, you'll see we actually did a major regrading there and lighting improvement last year or the year before. So it is, I still would prefer to have that closed at 5, and I think if unless there's a lot of, we just started kicking this around a few days ago here, so I haven't really thought too deep into it, but there will be some backlash on that. If we close the sites that have been open until 6 for the last 5 years, if we start closing them at 5, there's going to be, just like if we open them earlier or later, there's always going to be somebody that doesn't meet the schedule. When we closed, we changed some of the Rosebud hours, and I got one person calling consistently over a couple weeks there that it didn't work for them, but I think they've found an alternative now to make it work for that. So whereas everyone else, I think it worked a lot better by revising those hours. So we're trying to find the best fit for as many residents as we can on this, and your voices, what you're hearing through the communities are the best avenues that we have to hear on recommendations for that. So my thoughts are to have it a 10 to 6, 9 to 5 across the board. If council's in agreement with that, then I think I'd like to move forward on that. But 10 to 6, 9 to 5 in the winter.
Winter, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So these are the hours now. Do we need to do anything if we keep them the same?
No, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted the opportunity for
Just for
Councillor Wilson to
information.
express his, what he's
Okay.
hearing from his ratepayers. So that's something we can look at for the summer hours for next year. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Just changed from now.
when we bring it back, then you can stomp your feet or whatever you need to do.
Okay. And that would hold too for the waste transfer site vehicle count too? Was that part of the same talk? Same information? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on, Agriculture, Community and Protective Services, request for decision on the report.
Good afternoon, almost evening, Council.
Yeah.
My report is on page 282 of your agenda. I don't have anything new to add since it was written, so I'm happy to answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Okay, any questions?
I just have one request from a ratepayer. Willie Vera with Gleason Family Foods has met with Gleason RCMP, and they have agreed to sort of a 1 month, almost like a blitz or like an increased presence in downtown Gleason. And what he's requesting is if our peace officers could also increase their presence and focus on enforcing the public behavior bylaw. He's had some real increased incidents at his store with staff assaults, some incidents with some customers, and He has video, and it really has escalated in the last month or so. So RCMP, he was really, really pleased with their response, and he was just asking if the county could sort of coordinate with that.
Through the chair, did you say a specific date that this was going to happen, or just in general?
RCMP have indicated that they'll increase their presence over the next month and see if that can perhaps act as a deterrent for in the future. So from now until sort of the end of the year.
And just so the council understands, our peace officers, and this may or may not relate to this, our peace officers aren't able to do anything with criminal code offenses. And they can't deal with anything on provincial highways, numbered single-digit, two-digit, three-digit highways. Three-digit highways, they can. So just keep that in mind. Because sometimes we get requests, and this doesn't necessarily apply in this case, but sometimes we get requests to have our peace officers go out and do a criminal code offense. They can't. They have to call in the RCMP. They don't have the authority to deal with that, so.
And Willie is very specifically hoping just for enforcement on that public behavior bylaw.
Okay. I don't think we need a motion for that, do we? That's just for sure. Is there any other questions? A report for the, okay.
I make the motion that council accepts the October General Manager Report from Agricultural Community and Protective Services Department for information.
Okay, any questions? All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Angie. Correspondence items? A letter from Canadian Badlands. I'll just go through them if you have any questions. I believe I signed one of them papers this morning with the names filled in. A letter from the Canada Post, cutting back some hours in Gleason. Uh, 511 Alberta updates, a letter I believe Rocky Ford sent. Stemming back from the snowstorm.
So, through the chair on that one, for the Rocky Ford sending through, we've sent one similar to that.
Yeah.
Do we, I don't see where Darcy's asking for any support on that letter. Should we, I guess that'd be a good subject at our regional meeting to bring that up when a municipality within the region sends in one like this, it concerns the whole area. Why not have all the members in the sign it, or so that it gives it a little more substance? Because we're sending one, Rocky Ford's sending one, but I don't think Hazard sent one. I don't think Standard has sent one. So if we brought that up as an information item at our regional meeting, that when any municipality within the region decides to do something like that, contact the rest of it and have everybody either sign the same one or CC to them so that they can respond in agreement with where they're coming from.
Make a good conversation for our next meeting, for sure. Got a letter from County and New on their appointment to the IMDP committee. And I guess their council makeup. Council appointments from the Village of Standard. Report from the RCMP. Drumheller. Are there any questions? I think that was. Oh, the Alberta Irrigation Projects Association. Having a convention November 20th. Irrigation matters. Thank you letter from Stars. And Wheatland County's letter on 511 to the minister. UN University. Leadership workshop. And interagency, Wheatland interagency councils. What they do. Monthly meeting, I think. Bi-monthly for sure. Community Covenant Church Grief Group. I think that's the last one. Is there any discussion on any of the letters? And I would accept an information, a motion to accept them all as information. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. So the only thing left is in camera. Does anybody need a short break before we go into in camera? Okay. Motion to go in camera? No, nobody said yes, so we'll keep going.